I know what's going to happen for all these people. They're going to go home. They're going to say, I went to a great conference, was really interested. And they're going to tell someone about it, pretty excited, and the people are going to say to them, yeah, I believe everything in moderation. The truth is somewhere in the middle. And that's an extreme position. It's hard. I don't want to make life that complicated. Show me the study. And they're basically going to make it that it's a very extreme position to worry about chemicals or radiation or cell phones. And you start saying to yourself, well, I guess maybe I am being neurotic because everyone has their cell phones on and no one's thinking about chemicals. So the question we have to all decide is, what is balance? Because everyone's telling us that the middle is so far away from what you're saying. So what you're saying is a balance. They would consider extreme. What they're saying, the balance is to use the cell phone an hour a day instead of an hour and a half, or 2 hours instead of. So the question is, when it comes to chemicals and it comes to cell phones, how extreme should we be? Because we don't have the support. Everyone is telling us that we are totally extreme, and we're not sure if we are or not. So how extreme do you be when it comes to chemicals and cell phones, knowing that we live in a world where everything is chemicals and cell phones?
I would say that look around. We're all sick. Everybody it's just one person after another. There's cancer in everyone's family. There's chronic illness. It's extraordinary. If we were all feeling well, then maybe no big deal. But we're not. We're not, and our children are suffering, and it's out of hand right now. And I think we're in a crisis, and we really need to pay attention if we don't want to go down that road. I mean, how many more friends of mine are going to be suffering with breast cancer and mystery illnesses? And I'm a zealot, if you will, but I see that making these choices, it's not that hard. It's really not. I mean, it's just educating, and once you know, you can't go back. I think once you realize, like what Deborah's talking about, if you know the research, then why would you want to expose yourself to it? It seems almost insane to do that.
Sometimes it's not that easy. For example, Zika. Quick run, there's mosquitoes in the area, so I don't want Zika, I don't want my daughter to have Zika when she's pregnant. It's a big deal. So let's go aerial spraying for mosquitoes all through the southeast, and they knocked off, I tracked the word bee just to kind of keep myself current. And oh my gosh, 50 hives in North Carolina. This lady lost all her hives because the, could have been a crop duster, it could have been, I think it was actually a truck just spraying, knocked off her honeybees. Okay, and I feel sorry for her honeybees. Nothing else was flying after they finished. No ladybugs, no dragonflies, no nothing. We knocked off so much because we're afraid of, well, I don't want to get Zika either. So where's the trade-off? I don't want something, so I'm going to kill everything around me. It's not easy. Point.
That's true. However, there are other ways to deal with Zika. And one of the most important that you have to realize is that when you're faced with something like that and you're pregnant, you practice the precautions that you know about to avoid exposure to mosquitoes, which means that you do not go out in the dark when mosquitoes are feasting and ready to bite, that you wear clothing that is long and covered, and that you're very vigilant about your exposure. You don't go into areas where there's a Zika infestation, and you do have to get rid of the vectors, the standing water. For example, in Miami, which is where they had an actual mini epidemic that they quenched in the United States. That epidemic was quenched not by spraying, but by getting rid of standing water, which we know is a challenge, but it can be done. And even in poor African countries, bed netting, sleeping with bed nets and things like that can be very valuable and cost effective. But that is, I'll grant you, an outlier, and I'm not opposed to chemicals. When you have to choose between equine encephalitis, which can kill half the people who get it, which is a mosquito-borne disease, or not, you may have to spray some things at some time. I grant you that. But there's no question that we are overusing and misusing a lot of toxic chemicals now. You don't really need to have the perfect lawn, as you know very well, and you certainly don't want to compromise your health and that of your dog, which does happen if you have the perfect green lawn. And there are growing numbers of green golf courses now that are being managed with biological predators and what's called integrative pest management. And integrative pest management has come leaps and bounds over what it used to be. So we want to encourage integrative pest management for mosquitoes, which means using fish and introducing more birds and more predators of the mosquitoes to control it in that particular instance. But I think the other issue we have to acknowledge is that we live in a complex modern society, and we are all responsible for choices that we make where we control those choices. But there are certain things that we can't control, and that we have to do a better job of informing the public, to educate people, which I think everyone on this panel is trying to do. We educate people to motivate them, not to make them feel bad, but to make them feel good, to make them feel empowered, because knowledge is power. And if you know more, you can do more. And not to throw up your hands in paranoia and think, I'm just being neurotic, there's nothing I can do here. There's a lot you can do here. You can start with, if I may say, reading their books, and you can, and also mine, about what you can do, because we have a concept called practice safe technology. That doesn't mean no technology. I'm not telling you to go back to the Luddite dark era, but be safe and be sensible about what you're doing. And we think people will do that if they have information, because it's, knowledge is a form of power, and we want to empower you to know more about how to be safer for yourselves and your family.
I just want to respond to your question about how to not feel like the person with the tinfoil hat. And that is all too common of a response, that once you start living a lifestyle that is, about healthy eating and, hardwiring your house and reducing toxins, you begin to feel like that crazy person and an outlier. And what I will say is that all that is happening here, all we're talking about, is counterculture. And, you think about it, what is making us so sick is our culture. It really is. So we are part of a counterculture, and countercultures sometimes emerge to become the dominant culture. So if you just think of this as like a social movement, and what's really important in counterculture and social movements and movements for change is community. So you got to find your people. You got to find your tribe members. You go to conferences like this, you meet your peeps, you get together in your community, you start talking about this stuff. You're confident when you talk about how, oh yeah, I use baking soda. You're confident. This is what you do, and pretty soon, if you're in your community, you're around other people that are doing the same things, it slowly, over time, becomes the norm. And I think we have to embrace these changes, be proud of them. A lot of people who are doing the B work and talk about the people who are doing the B work, because no one knows that's going on or that's important. And so I think the more we talk about it and the more we lift each other up who are doing this kind of good work, the sooner this counterculture will become the dominant culture.
Bats dying, pollinators dying, lawn chemicals, pharmaceutical drugs in our water, antibiotic drugs, chemicals, wireless radiation, kids getting autism and chronic disease, medical and telecommunications industry having control over government. If you right now became completely powerful head of the country with total control and authority, what would be the 5 to 10, or 5 is fine, specific laws that you would enact as the head with full authority that would have the most impact? What are your 5 specific, not philosophy, the specific laws that you would put in place right away?
Because we're making America great again, right?
No, I actually, as some of you know, I was a presidential appointee. And I want to say, for having served in a government and been approved by the Senate, it's not easy. I mean, we can make fun of officials and everything, and some of them are really perfect for Saturday Night Live. There's no question about it. But it's really not easy to govern. We have a big, complicated country with lots of people. Having said that, with all due respect, I don't think we necessarily need a single new law. I really don't. I think we need to implement the ones we have. We have the right to know. It's absolutely embedded in the Constitution. A democracy depends on an informed public that freely consents to be governed and elects people to represent the people because they consent to be governed because they are informed. So at the very core of our democracy is the right to know. We are being denied that right to know because the government is not doing the testing on the chemicals, is not screening things before they're introduced. It's treating us like subjects in an experiment with no controls, whether it's chemicals or wireless radiation. So I don't think we need new laws. I think what we need is to use the ones we have already. We have, as you know, pesticide laws. I helped to write the toxic chemical law that is, you know, not very effective right now, but it could be effective if it were ever used effectively. And so it's not a question that we need new laws. We need new implementers of the laws. We need people who respect our rights as American citizens in a great democracy. And yes, the greatest democracy the world has ever known. We really do. And if we had that, I think that we would be much better off than talking about specific laws that we should organize to have. Because I think we have adequate laws, we just need to use the ones we've got. And we need to use our rights as American citizens to know, to be informed, and to be involved in decisions. So for example, for 5G, there's a law being proposed right now that you all need to write to your senators and congressmen about to allow 5G antennas to be put anywhere the companies want, and you can't say anything at all about where they're located, and localities are not going to be able to get even the normal fees for where the antennas go. So that is why Governor Jerry Brown vetoed that bill when it came before him a few months ago in California. The bill was to say that municipalities would get a small amount of money for the 5G antennas, and they could not object at all to where they were located. And this got the city of San Jose and Sacramento as a city, and San Francisco, and I think LA, to object to the law because they were being cut out of any decision making. But the law may come back yet again, and at the federal level, it is now pending. There are several variations of this law, a new law that would allow telecom companies to put these antennas wherever they want. They estimate that in California, there would be 50,000 new antennas in the cities alone. And every 200 to 300 yards, there would be a 30-foot high tower with an antenna that could be the size of a small refrigerator. And by the way, they're calling them, like George Orwell, small cells. There's nothing small about these cells. They're higher frequency, so they don't go as far, but they are, you will need thousands and thousands more than we have now. Every city. So that's an example of a law that we ought to organize against, but I don't think we need new laws, and I'd love to hear if you have a different view.
I would like to see more transparency in our products. So right now, the word fragrance on a label can mean up to 100 different synthetic chemicals, and it's a trade secret, and so manufacturers don't have to reveal what's in their products. So, and there's something called the precautionary principle in the European Union that says that the manufacturer has to prove it's safe before going to market. Here in America, that's not true. We put things into market, and then if people get sick, then they have a recall. It just doesn't make sense to me to do it that way. It seems backwards.
I get so frustrated with corporations and messaging, and when you look at the word organic or these other places, they're so manipulated. Today, if I'm an organic company, or actually I'm an organic orchard, and I go out to whatever 3 websites I want to go find whatever product, and they don't carry it, then I can now still keep my label organic and put straight pesticides out there. It is in law. I tried 3 times, and I tried 3 times. I'm still organic. So not fair. So I don't know where to, if I were to enact a law, if I could, Truth in words. Gosh, how to greenwashing, yeah, because I don't have an answer, but the right to know and using words that can't be, we're all inundated with too much stuff. I can't be the experts on electromagnetic, you guys can't be experts on bees, I'm not experts on, earthworms. I have to rely upon the experts around me to give me good knowledge. And so, I can't know. And so I've got to have some outside independent place that is unbelievably neutral, giving me advice. And maybe your websites that you're talking about are the right ones.
Could you clarify that? Did you, I buy organic produce. Is my organic produce organic?
They are telling you that it's organic, yes. They are telling you that it's organic. So it's up to the farmer and their ethics to follow those lines or not.
But if they 3 times can't find it, they can put regular chemicals?
That's like in the Oregon law, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of places out there that if you dig deep, I tried to be as good as I tried. I couldn't solve it.
But I'm saying when I go to Whole Foods and
Yeah.
I buy strawberries that say organic, you're saying is it possible that
Absolutely.
those? Are you sure?
Yes. I wouldn't say across the whole country. I think it's Oregon. That it is. They've tried their best, but the word organic is a greenwashed word. It has been absolutely compromised.
But what about if it's certified, USDA certified organic? I'm assuming that
I
that's
hope so. That's
at least 95% organic.
So I only know what I've read, so I can't cover the whole country, but I have enough doubt in my mind that it's not as it once was thought to be. I don't have the proof there.
Okay. What is going on in the United States with sperm quality and fertility? Are we reproducing as well as we used to, or is there a difference? And if there is a difference in sperm quality, what is the cause of it, and what is the logical conclusion of what's going to happen over the next 25 years?
I've published on this in the Journal of the American Medical Association and other places. First of all, the average male today has almost half the sperm that his grandfather had. Half that the grandfather had. And we know that from studies of military recruits. Those are men that come into the military that have been monitored. We get a sample of sperm. And so a colleague of mine once said that men today are half the men of their grandfather's age. But that's not a joke. It's not a joke at all. The website of the Cleveland Clinic on infertility advises that men who want to father healthy children get their phones out of their pocket. That's the website of the Cleveland Clinic. That is hardly left-wing fringe neurotic ideas, Steve. Okay? The Cleveland Clinic and all major fertility clinics around the world today have similar advice. And it's very interesting to me that when I was, my book came out in India, and as well as, I guess, a dozen other countries. It was the Indian infertility experts who first identified the problem of hip, thin Indian guys with 2 or 3 phones at their hips or on their pockets with lowered sperm count. And they did studies where they took sperm from healthy men and put them in 2 different test tubes. And the test tube that got exposed to cell phone radiation, those sperm died 3 times faster, with 3 times more damage on the mitochondria of their DNA, which is the engine of the cell. This is very strong evidence that cell phone radiation can damage sperm. Now, other things damage sperm, including the pesticide DBCP. And men who were working with this pesticide for production of bananas and pineapples in Costa Rica and Ecuador were found to be sterile. And I wrote about this in my Smoke Ran Like Water book and also in The Secret History of the War on Cancer. I don't know if you have either of those books here. I don't think you do. But in those books, I wrote about this problem in a chapter called Save the Males. Because the males are endangered and they are exposed to solvents, and the so-called inert ingredients in pesticides can be much more toxic to sperm than the active ingredient, just as you said. And so we have a lot of evidence about what is causing the decline in male fertility. And a lot of the experts in this have identified pesticides and solvents and heavy metals, as well as cell phone radiation. And that is why you find advice about avoiding those exposures to men who want to father healthy children. There's no question about it. There's also been, by the way, a decline in the birth of boys. The sex ratio at birth was 1.05 male to female. We don't understand exactly why, but it's historically believed to reflect a number of genetic properties of the X and Y chromosome. You know, women are XX, right? And men are XY, right? So the Y chromosome, if you'll hold this for a minute for me, the Y chromosome is missing a leg to stand on. And it may actually be weaker than the X chromosome that has 2 legs to stand on, right? There actually is some evidence for this in genetics. And what we know is that all over the world in industrial countries, there's been a decline in the birth of baby boys relative to baby girls at birth. We don't know why fewer boys are being born. But this has been happening in all industrial countries for some time. It's certainly not cell phones only, but it certainly is one of the factors.
I have to tag on something you said when you said save the males. I kind of get a lump in my throat because I have a particular concern about boys, and that is that boys are afflicted with neurobehavioral and neurodevelopmental disorders at a much greater rate than girls. And right now, as I mentioned earlier, we have 1 in 40 children diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. That number is estimated to be about a ratio of 4 boys to every 1 girl diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. There are estimates, if you take the rates of growth of autism diagnoses over the last few decades and you project those growth rates forward, there are estimates that we will have 1 in 4 children diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder by 2033. So if you think about the ratio of boys to girls, 4 to 1, for every 4 kids that get autism, 1 will be a girl, the rest will be boys. So by 2033, if we have 1 in 4 children with autism, how many boys won't have autism? That's the kind of thing that runs chills down my spine when I think about it. And the other thing, going back to your question about sperm and for infertility, I actually think that the chronic illness epidemic in our children begins at infertility. Infertility is the red flag. It's telling us that either the mom or the dad or both of them, their bodies don't want to reproduce. But what do? We do IVF, and we have all these amazing technologies to help our bodies reproduce when our bodies are not able to. And that there's all kinds of research looking at the consequences of many of the fertility treatments, the drugs, the IVF, all these things that we do to try and support fertility in bodies that are not able to safely reproduce. So there is a real concern there, and Save the Males is such a great title because it is such a deep concern of mine. As a parent of a boy, as a parent of daughters, I just worry for how it's going to shape up a couple of decades down the road.
By the way, Deborah, do you feel that your fellow panelists are being a little extreme and exaggerating these points at all, or do you feel that they're completely accurate with the information?
I think on the autism story, it's even worse in the Black community. The rate is higher for young Black baby boys, as you know, and it is a real serious problem. I really don't, Steve. I think that you guys are doing a good job of highlighting things that are seldom talked about. This makes us all uncomfortable. It makes us all very uncomfortable. The society can be judged by how well it treats those who are unable to take care of themselves, how well it treats children and the elderly. And we're not doing a very good job because we have, on the other end of the spectrum, we have increased rates of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And more importantly, the thing I find very troubling, we have an earlier age of diagnosis of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, an earlier age of diagnosis. And that's also signaling that something's going on with our environment and our genes. And one of the things that we know from research I'll show tomorrow is that if you keep a phone next to your brain for 50 minutes, you change the amount of glucose in the part of the brain that's most exposed. That's another article from the Journal of the American Medical Association, done by the director of the National Institute of Drug Abuse with a brilliant study design. They put a helmet on somebody on several people, and they did a PET scan, and they had phones on both sides, and the person wearing the phones did not know if the phone was turned on. It was simply turned on. It wasn't playing music, it wasn't doing anything. And the signal being on next to the brain, what does it do? Well, it's smart. So 900 times a minute, it goes to the tower. Where are you? Here I am. It's a handshake, electromagnetic handshake. Where are you? Here I am. And because it's close, half of the radiation from the phone gets into the brain. And it gets in, just about 2 inches to the adult brain, and by the way, almost through the brain of a baby. Okay? And after 50 minutes, they did a PET scan, and they showed a significant increase in glucose in the brain. Well, guess what Alzheimer's has been called? Diabetes of the brain. Because there's too much glucose in the brain. And that's where you hear about, and of course there are things like grains that contribute, the brain grain, et cetera. But the fact is, I think that this is another one of the avoidable causes, and this is another end of for the elderly that we have to be aware of. And this may also, there are reports, I don't know if you have any on yours, of people with dementia that has been stabilized or reversed with certain interventions. Do you have any of that in your website yet? But I think I'll try to connect you with some people who've done that work. Some of them come out of functional medicine, like a neurologist in Florida.
Dr. Dale Bredesen's doing
Yes,
research.
that book is incredible. Well, actually, do you know about it? You could tell them a little bit about that work.
Yeah, actually I met Dr. Bredesen a few years ago, and I was telling him about my tumor, and he said, what you did was you changed your epigenetics by making lifestyle shifts, and that's what he's doing with Alzheimer's, that he is putting people on pure food and water and taking out all the toxins, and he's finding a tremendous reversal of Alzheimer's, where people, they're shocked because current knowledge seems to be, well, it's irreversible, but he's seeing that it is reversible by making lifestyle shifts. Dale Bredesen, Bredesen.
Doesn't he also advocate a slightly modified paleo diet?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, when I looked at it. It's a diet that has no artificial sugars, no added sugars, except for stevia, and I think xylitol. But it's very, very much, like you say, pure food, but a little bit heavy toward the paleo side, not just vegan, which I know doesn't fly with some of the ideas that you may have here, Steve. But in fact, they had shown extraordinary outcomes of people who were unable to walk on their own and couldn't find their car keys and couldn't function, restored to functionality. So it's an extraordinary series of stories. I think it'd be, the other end you might want to add to.
Right, his book is on the New York Times bestseller now. I think it's called The End of Alzheimer's, is the name of it.
So before I ask my next question, I just want to say that these issues are very, very disturbing, very real. The 5G, everything you're saying. There's a local magazine called Creations Magazine, and Neil and Andrea, they're over there. When you guys stand up for a second, it would be good if you guys wrote about this. It would be good if you followed up on all of these subjects and included it in your magazine for future issues. These are urgent issues, and we don't have a way except for email to reach the local audience, and this reaches the local audience. So if you could connect with these speakers and try to follow up and let the rest of Long Island know, because you have connection with them about these issues. These are urgent issues, and it would be great if you could continue this conversation. We'll do it with videos, but if you could get this stuff into the magazine, that would be really great. I want to ask you about a number of things. You can comment on any of these or none of them, whatever you want, but again, just to pick out what you want to comment on. So 1, hair dryers. 2, vaccines. 3, the antibiotics that we're giving beef and chicken. 4, sunscreens. 5, monarch butterflies. Why are they dying? 6, the benefits of each of us growing our own food. And 7, turning off all the electricity at night in the bedroom. So I'll say those again. 1 is hair dryers, 2 is vaccines, 3 is antibiotics in beef and chicken and turkey and pork, 4 is sunscreens, 5 is monarch butterflies and why are they dying, 6 is the benefits of each of us growing our own food, and 7 is turning off all the electricity in the bedroom. If there's any or all of those that you want to comment, I'd like to get some thoughts on those topics.
I'd like to talk about the antibiotics. Pigs, chickens, cows, they're dosed with high doses of not only antibiotics but growth hormones, and we are what our animals eat, and so it's getting into us. And one other thing are the fish farms. I know there's a big problem with overfishing, so they're creating these fish farms, but they're also because they're in such close quarters, they're giving the fish antibiotics as well. And they're also, like these salmon farms, they're giving them food that the flesh of the salmon would be gray unless they put in artificial orange food dye. And so they have a color wheel, these fish farmers, and they'll pick the color orange that they want their fish to eat, because we as consumers don't want to buy gray salmon. It's insane. The thing about it is that artificial food dyes are banned in Europe because they cause emotional problems with children, and so here in America they're fed, they're allowed, and so that is a big problem too. So yeah, the antibiotics, when we're eating food that contains antibiotics, we become antibiotic resistant. So if we do need an antibiotic down the road for some reason, we'll become resistant. It won't work as well on us, and it just gets stronger and stronger, the need to keep upping the antibiotics. So yeah, organic, again, sustainable, non-GMO, you'll avoid the antibiotics.
I'll hit the sunscreen topic because it's one of my favorites. And I think dermatologists probably hate me for opening my mouth about this subject, but I think when we think about sunscreen, we have to think about the concept of adaptation, and we have to think about the fact that before the modern era, all of us lived outside with daily sun exposure. First thing in the morning, you got up, you looked outside, you looked at the sun, not directly, but you saw the sun got on your eyes, it got on your skin, you were outside most of the day. Sun was a part of your daily life. You were adapted to having that sun on you all the time. Fast forward to the modern world, most of us spend our days indoors in air conditioning, in artificial light. We don't see the sun very often. So what happens when you go outside for your vacation and you've been inside the whole year? You get sunburned because you have not adapted to that sun exposure. So we have this, and yes, too much sun, like in that kind of instance, can cause cancer. It's like any other kind of radiation. However, what we need to do is start understanding the health-giving properties of natural light, of sunlight, and the fact that we actually need it to have and sustain good health. And there's myriad reasons. Everybody knows about vitamin D and about how you have to have the sun exposed to your skin to produce vitamin D, which is important for immune function. That's pretty well known. But what scientists are beginning to realize now is that the sun, and seeing the sun first thing in the morning, on your eyeballs without sunglasses on, is actually really important for regulating your circadian rhythms and all kinds of biorhythms in your body, right down to like digestion and things like that. The sun is also important for actually helping you produce energy on a cellular level. There's research now showing that the sun exposure may play a role in helping your mitochondria to produce energy. Okay, so we are in the modern world living without sun exposure just by living indoors so much. But then we have this paranoia and fear of getting sun on our skin because we're afraid of skin cancer. So we put sunscreens on. That there's two problems. One, you're blocking your sun exposure, And two, a lot of the sunscreens have toxins in them. So that's when you would go back to the database that Beth recommended, which is ewg.org, has a skin deep database where you can tell which sunscreens are more or less toxic. So the toxicity issue is one thing, but I'm an advocate for getting sun on your skin every day if possible. When you're in the Northeast, it's really hard. But being smart, and being smart means if you've been indoors all year and you go to Florida for a week's vacation, you can't go out in the sun and just expose your skin like that, because it's maladaptation. Your skin is not adapted to seeing the sun like that. So that's what I have to say about sunscreen.
I just wanted to add, I have a recipe for natural sunscreen. It's ascorbic acid powder and water mixed together. You could add a little glycerin. And it's not... it doesn't sit on top, but it actually absorbs into the skin, so you need to put it on about 20 minutes before you go out. But we used to go to Hawaii with my fair-skinned daughter, and she never got burned. So,
And as you know, that's also a good thing for aging skin, because you're basically, vitamin C is good for other properties of the skin, building collagen and whatnot. But I will say, as someone who spends a lot of time in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, at high altitudes where you cannot avoid damaging sun rays, though I don't disagree with anything either of you has said, that zinc oxide is one of the most effective blocks. And if you really need to be concerned about, as you do when you're 2 miles high in altitude, blocking the sun, the best thing is long sleeve shirts and pants, not exposing your skin, and using zinc oxide and blocking it, especially if you're fair, when you have to be in that circumstance. And many of the sunscreens, as EWG's website, the Skin Deep website shows, many of the sunscreens contain a lot of toxic ingredients. You want to be careful. I think there's another way you can make it with coconut oil and certain of the essential oils, lavender, but some people may be sensitive to that as well. So there's a bunch of recipes for natural sunscreens that you can try out. Has anyone heard of the efficacy of a capsule that you take that they use in Australia to prevent sunburn? I've heard that there was such a thing. I don't know. But to answer, say again? Lycopene. Oh, well that's, yeah, I know, but there's something else in lycopene can be useful as well. But there's something else in I've forgotten the name of it. Maybe I'll check with my friend from Australia who may be awake when I finish here. The other questions you asked, hair dryers. Old-fashioned hair dryers are really bad sources of high electromagnetic fields. The best hair dryer is air. But if you can't do that because you want a certain type of style, right, then if you can get a hair dryer where the motor is in the wall, so you're not having your high exposure in your hand, that's the best thing to do, because it does give you high exposure. Steve, would you remind me, you had a few other questions as well.
Vaccines, the monarch butterfly dying out or being extinct, and why does that matter? The benefits of each house growing their own food,
Right.
turning off all your electricity.
All right, well, obviously, sleep in the dark, eat your vegetables is really important. It really is. And sleep in the dark is important, for, as Beth has said, because you reset your clock when you wake up and you have light. That's what we are programmed to do. If you sleep with blue light interferes with the production of melatonin. Melatonin is a natural hormone that you all make when you close your eyes and go to sleep at night. And it's interfered with if you have any flickering electric lights in your bedroom. So get rid of anything that is flickering. And if you had trouble sleeping, certainly you can think of getting a kill switch, for your bedroom, which is something you've advocated for years. Or you can make sure to unplug whatever it is that's, you can put it all on a power strip and just turn it off. That's also a solution for nighttime sleep. The vaccine story is complicated, okay? There's no question that we overdo vaccines, particularly for young children. No question about it. There have been, lots has been written about this, and there's a CDC study that was suppressed showing that for African American baby boys, there was an increase in autism in those that had been recently vaccinated at young ages. So what I told my daughter with my youngest grandchildren was there's certain vaccines that children should have, that they should have them spaced out as far as possible, and that you have to be very careful not to overload their immune system at a young age. Now, there are different points of view on this, but the reality is that at this point, prudent use of vaccines is what the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends, and what I'm comfortable recommending as well, although I know they've been overdone and people have become sick because of it. And never, ever take a child for a vaccination if the child has a cold or isn't feeling well. Never.
I can touch on two things. The monarch butterfly and the honeybee. So there's only one bee in the world, and there's only one butterfly in the world. We tend to generalize. The monarch itself is, representative of a lot of butterflies, and its problem really comes down to it migrates from the north to Mexico and back up, and really we're just interrupting those pollination pathways where there's supposed to be food all the way along, and we're just interrupting it with agriculture and depletion of pollen sources. We are throwing chemicals out there, and it's just it is what it is.
Well, there's one other possibility for the butterfly, and that is the cryptochrome. Cryptochrome has been identified, the CRY gene has been identified in the eye of the monarch butterfly and most migrating insects and animals. And the cryptochrome is that allows the animal to detect both light and color, crypto, and chrome for color, but it is thought to be critical to detecting the Earth's magnetic field. And they've been elegant research on this where they took birds, the dove, and they put goggles on them. And the birds were able to find their way blinded by goggles. So they concluded that there was something else besides sight that was working. And they said, and then they identified this cryptochrome. And I've actually been doing some work on it right now because it turns out that humans have a cryptochrome. And they've done some incredible work where they've taken the human cryptochrome and put it into a knockout fly and shown that they can do all kinds of interesting things. They can take the cryptochrome out of an insect and then it gets lost, the fruit fly, which is, all right, get totally lost, and then they put it back in and it can find its way like the best of them.
Are we saying, how are we knocking this off from the monarch?
I don't know how we're knocking it out of the monarch, but I'll tell you one thing I think it interferes with it.
Electromagnetic
Yeah.
radiation.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And I think we need to figure that one out really soon.
And on the food part, a while ago, I think 2014, maybe they said 42 million backyards had food growing of some nature. That's awesome. And I think it might just be a strawberry plant or it could be just a tomato.
Right.
My want is, I believe communities need to be a little stronger. I'm touching an organization called American in Bloom, and one of their shifts from having just a lot of blooms in a community is thinking through edible landscapes. Mm-hmm. And so go through, we have a couple places in Seattle where you, as the general public, are allowed to walk on there and pull an apple off a tree because it's the community's apple. And so to change communities into more food-based communities, so your right-of-ways, your little medians between your sidewalk and the street, grow food for the public. And it's just an idea that I think makes more community sense, as well as health sense. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, I'd like to take any questions from the audience. That woman over there in the black, if you can give her a microphone, hold on. Sorry, we're going to steal a mic, if you could share. Where? The woman right there.
Hi, I want to ask you about fluoride vitamins. We talked about vaccines. How do you feel about the vitamins the pediatricians are prescribing for infants, and also the fluoride in the drinking water? What is the stand on that? I'm 100% anti. I'm a dental hygienist. I promote treatments in the office. According to the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry and the American Dental Association, they both promote it, and it's acceptable standard by all associations, but I just feel there's just too much research on it, and I think that it's just overload, overkill. And working in pediatrics, I see the disease so frequently because they have so many adverse reactions. And as soon as they stop taking the fluoride vitamins, which I just kind of on the side say, just give it a shot, stop taking it, see if there's a difference in the digestion, in the behavior, in things like that. And sure enough, there is. It just amazes me. It's like my own study. But I just wanted to know what the feeling is and what your position is on that.
My dad's a dentist, so I've had this conversation ad nauseum, actually. Fluoride's a neurotoxin. It just is. Does it help protect the enamel of the teeth? Yep, it sure does. Is it a public initiative that was undertaken that was successful in helping to prevent decay? Yes, absolutely it did. But it's not without consequence. So my feeling on fluoride, and fluoride, by the way, is also one of those compounds that is synergistically more toxic in the presence of other things. So like aluminum and fluoride together are synergistically much more toxic together. So I think dental decay is intimately related to diet and nutrition. And so if we're looking at ways to stop dental decay, we have to start with nutrition. I mean, the Weston A. Price Foundation has been advocating that for decades, saying that, we're barking up the wrong tree with dental decay and with using fluoride but it's the same kind of approach that we use with pharmaceuticals, right? Which is, what's the cheapest, easiest, quickest way that's the least painful for people to have to fix this one problem, but it creates other problems downstream. So I'm not an advocate of fluoride, don't use it myself, but I believe nutrition is the way to prevent dental decay.
Yeah, let's get the sugar out of baby food. There's a lot of it. It's hidden, and you can make your own. But if you're a busy person and you can't make your own, there shouldn't be no sugar in baby food. It's not needed, and it should be against the law to give an infant, which I've seen, soda to drink in bottles, in a baby bottle, to give them soda to drink. People should understand that sodas are just poison, really, because they have as much sugar as they can have without turning solid. That's how they decide how sweet to make them, how much sugar they can take. I totally agree with Beth. It does prevent decay, and it is a neurotoxin, and therefore I do not recommend it be added unless you have a child, which you may have, that has a very poor teeth because of genetic underlying issues, poor malabsorption of minerals. In that case, you can topically apply and but in the dental office, as opposed to giving them vitamins, which I think are almost never warranted. Yeah, no, I understand, but let's go on to another question. I think we are in agreement about that danger.
Want to get the lady in the back there?
Not sure if you're aware, but right here in Huntington, we have 160 small cells that were placed throughout just that town. There's more in Centerport, Northport, town of Oyster Bay, and I know there's some in Garden City in people's backyards. I have one right outside, 70 feet from where my children sleep. What could we do?
We have a website, ehtrust.org, and it has resources on it that have been used by communities to stop this. In Santa Rosa right now, there is an active effort underway to block the proliferation of these. I think we need to try to work with the senators. We really do. We need to get this before Gillibrand and Schumer. I think this is going to become a public health emergency, because what we know about 5G, which I'm going to talk about tomorrow, which I'm happy to share with you, is that 5G accelerates bacterial and viral growth. It accelerates the growth of cancer cells. I mean, come on. We don't need anything that's going to be accelerating cancer growth in our general environment. We also know that it penetrates the skin. They say, oh, it's just a 64th of an inch. Yeah, but guess what? It resonates with the sweat ducts, just like antenna. And by the way, the same frequency that's in 5G is being used by the Department of Defense now for weapons that I think I'll show the video tomorrow, that make people feel, when you expose them to 5G at a high power, that their skin is on fire. okay? I'm sorry to hear that this has happened here, and I don't know what else to offer you but the information with which you should go to your authorities and say, look, this is not a good thing. And in the case of your son, and if it's his bedroom, there are some shielding techniques that you can do that will help. E-H Trust. That's E as in Edward, H as in Harry, T as in Tom, trust.org. Look up 5G on that website, and I'll be happy to talk with you tomorrow at my talk at 11 o'clock, where I am going to focus on this issue at the very end.
In the very back, the blue hat. Right there.
Could you please repeat the website about the different sickness that the kids are having today that we could look up?
There's two websites I'd refer you to. One is epidemicanswers.org, and that's epidemic like the plague, epidemicanswers.org, and also documentinghope.com. And on both of those sites, you will see some recovery stories. They're different recovery stories, but you'll see a variety of different chronic illnesses that kids have recovered from on there.
Okay, the guy over there all the way at the end.
Thank you for a great conference. It's my first day getting here, but I read the website, and it's very scary. I mean, there's so many things. When you were talking about the sunlight, the first thing that I thought of was the chemtrails. And what is that doing to our sun exposure? And, you know, there's the idea that there's so many of these organizations, you know, pancreatic cancer, we got to find a cure. If we looked at what's the cause, it would seem like then you wouldn't get it in the first place. And just one of the things that just seems so ironic, you know, the woman said about all of these cell towers, but, you know, we had a Navy plume, and the Navy is supposed to be protecting us, and yet there's so many chemicals that this is supposedly leaching out, and for 30, 40 years is happening. I mean, there's so many things I could talk about, but on Long Island, they said that there are some serious chemicals, medications that are going through filtration systems that are not really being filtered. A woman was on Long Island Business Report saying something like a dioxin 1,4, and it's even in Tide. The clothes that you're washing is now becoming toxic. It just seems like there's 100 things I could probably ask you guys about, but you know, ironically, you say the Navy or whatever the military is using this as a weapon, but yet the military is causing so much toxicity, nuclear weapons. All these things that are supposed to keep us safe are actually, ironically, like a George Orwell nightmare. This is actually what's killing us. So I don't know. I mean, when you say about the water supply, chemtrails, is this part of depopulation? Do they want to make people sick? You know, not to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but it seems like there is a power that wants people sick so they can't think about voting or you know, like even Sunday, how many people are watching a Super Bowl and they're being inundated with the worst chemical foods of Doritos, of all these things?
Okay. Let them respond. Let them respond.
You know, you're right, there's a world of things that we're living in, but all you can do is get informed about the things you can control, right? And right now, you can control what goes in your mouth. You can control the things you put on your body, what you use to clean in your home, and how you're exposed to and how you use technology. And we are here talking about things you can control. When it comes to bees, what are we supposed to do? I want to ask you, what are we supposed to do?
The answer for bees is I need you guys raising native bees. Listen to me tomorrow. I think I'm at 9 o'clock.
What does that mean?
Raising native bees. There's, out of the 4,000 species of bees in the U.S., a quarter of them nest in holes. Reeds, got wood trays, holes in trees, but nest in holes. I can pick these bees up from your yard and move them over to my neighbor's yard. Okay? These bees are going to be giving us far more food, but I've got to get the bees of Tennessee found, raised, in enough quantities that I can move them into organic farms. Same thing of Ohio bees. So these bees out there, and this is, I'll talk about tomorrow, but physical. No, so this is the misunderstanding. Out of the 24,000 species of bees, got that, okay? 95%, maybe 96, are solitary. Every female is a queen. They're very gentle. They don't live in hives. They don't live in hives. They live holes in the ground, but every independent, they just live for 6 weeks, go in the ground or go into holes, and they lay an egg, or gather a little pollen, lay an egg, and seal that little chamber, one egg at a time. And they maybe have 20 eggs in their body, and they're done. All those bees all come out about the same time. Some bees are coming out in March, some bees come out in August. And so out of all these thousands of species, I need you guys learning about whole nesting bees. It is the future of our food supply. The honeybee is something it's a nice little insect that raises honey, but it's not a great pollinator. We'll chat about that tomorrow. What Beth just answered, what you said about counterculture, that's actually right. That's the right words, and it's the right attitude, and it's these people here that are going to be making the difference. They've heard about it, and it's spread the word.
Yeah, I'd like to make one comment. If you are watching this conference live or on live stream or on replay, you got to come to terms with one simple thing, whether you planned it or not. You are being called to be far more active than you might have wanted to. You might not have wanted this job, but you're obviously a tuned-in, conscious enough person, and you are the nose cone of the rocket. And there's hundreds of people, and you might have said, I just came to this conference, I know I didn't even want, I'm sorry. You are being asked and enlisted to play such a bigger role than you might have planned, and maybe you deep inside always understood that you were capable of this, but for everyone who wants to go home tonight and sleep and say, Deborah's got it handled, she is screaming at the top of her lungs. They're all screaming. They did the best they could. They wrote books. They're doing everything they can. They're giving it to you. I organized a conference. This is all I got. I made it free. There's nothing left. We are now counting on anyone who hears this message to be in their power fully, completely assume that you are smart, you're capable, you can do it, and lead in a way that is bigger than you had ever planned, because obviously if you're here, you're supposed to be here, you're supposed to play a big role. So that's my thought.
Steve, we use a word called prosumer versus consumer. Consumers just spend, a prosumer knows where their dollar is going, and you are voting with your dollar. So just think through being a prosumer.
Hi, good evening. You made a comment about a woman who protested or went against what the doctor said, and she was successful. In my experience, in my observation, it seems that she could have had her child taken away. Does your organization protect against that? No. Okay.
No, I just want to say that does happen all the time, and you'll hear things about medical kidnapping. One of the things that concerns me on that topic is there are children, many children today, who have really complex medical conditions that look a little bit like autism, a little bit like mitochondrial disease. They're sort of they can't really diagnose them. And a lot of those parents are being accused of Munchausen's by proxy, which, if those of you who know it, it's this psychiatric kind of diagnosis that's given to mothers who make up diseases or conditions to get attention. It's very rare. Munchausen's by proxy rarely happens, but it's becoming an increasing label or accusation for mothers who always trust the mother's gut. The mother's gut knows better than anything else. And those mothers are trying to get help for their children because they know their kids are sick, but just because they don't fit in a diagnostic category or they don't have a specific drug for their child, they just get bounced from hospital to hospital, doctor to doctor, and that's when it becomes a problem. So that story I told you, that mother was lucky. She was, because she could have gotten in trouble there.
And I want to add something to that. Please, any of you who have an illness or some problem you don't know about, check out where your router's located. Change what you're doing with your cell phone right now, and you may find that that alone will create a much big improvement in whatever health issue you're dealing with. Whether it's insomnia or migraines or rash or unexplained belly aches, check out where the exposures are to the router and to the phone, and don't let anybody fall asleep with an iPad on their body, ever. They're microwave radiation going right into their body. It's a very bad thing to do. So please do, that's one of the things to check, and the others, of course, are the exposures that the Beths have been talking about that we have to be more vigilant about. And absolutely, I know of many mothers that have saved their children's lives because they went back and argued with the doctor and said, look, there is a problem, we've got to do something about it.
I have a story of a mother just like that. Her child developed tics, and he was diagnosed with pandas, which I had never heard of before. And then it turned out she luckily had this amazing doctor who took the time, because so many doctors, will take just a few minutes, but he took the time and he felt the boy's neck and he said, oh, you have swollen glands. And they discovered that the child had a root canal, which I didn't even know that they do for a 3-year-old child, root canal. He had a massive infection, and when they pulled the tooth and fixed it, he's completely normal now. He's no tics, no tummy problems, and she knew something was wrong, and she just kept persisting and persisting until she found an answer.
If I may ask another question.
Yes.
I'm anxious to, because I have also observed there's a kind of an evil pull with cell phones with the teens and the young kids. And if you try to take it away, there is a very negative reaction. Oh, yeah. You said that there was intervention in another country. Do we have something here? Because it's a definite syndrome.
Thank you for asking the question. I think that's an excellent, excellent point to make. There are, as far as I know, a few psychiatrists that are recognizing this as the addiction that it is and working to create interventions. The younger in age a child starts with this, the worse it is. But just like any addiction, it starts with the 12 steps. I have a problem, and it takes a family intervention to get there. And family policies, the American Academy of Pediatrics is recommending as a policy, no cell phones at dinner, take them away at night, no, even from the teens, take them away at night. No internet after a certain time for everybody, including the parents. That's a little challenging for some people. And if you have to use it as an alarm clock, put it out in the hallway. They make enough noise, it wakes up anybody. And really start to disconnect. The title of my book is Disconnect, and there are ways to do it. But there are a few doctors that are doing this now. They're treating this as a family syndrome, clinical psychologists and psychiatrists. And we have some information on this on our website as well. But you're not alone. You are not alone. And there's a growing recognition. I'll show you tomorrow, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates did not let their kids have these devices when they were children. They did not. And they made billions of dollars out of getting everybody else to do it, but their children weren't allowed. That tells you something, right?